I get quite a lot of questions and see a lot of people asking elsewhere online too about what are the correct fingerings for chords on piano. Well, the truth is that there's no real right fingering for a chord that works for every situation, and we need to be adaptable. What you want to use actually in a bit of music depends on where you're going next and where you've just come from. So we want to practice different ways so we can be versatile when we play. Just quickly, remember that we do number our fingers so we know what we're talking about. Thumbs are 1, and then we go outwards 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's look at chords that only use white notes first, and this is going to apply to any of those basic major and minor chords that only contain white notes in them. I'm going to use this F major chord as an example. Then I'll move on to some inversion shapes, chords that contain black keys, and some 4-note chords too. Starting with the right hand then, if you are new to piano, the easiest one, technically speaking, to get going with is likely going to be using fingers 1, 2, and 3. Although I want to make it super clear, you don't want to be using this position all the time. So fingers 1, 2, and 3. Now a situation where you may want to use that, for example, is if you've just played these 2 notes using the top 2 fingers before that, like this. That left these 2 fingers free to play those 2 notes, and then these 3 fingers free to come straight on that chord. Then there's 2 other positions you're probably going to end up using loads, which is 1, 3, and 5. 1, 3, and 5. Just quickly, it's really important that you don't make the mistake of trying to get your fingers in place one by one, which makes it more difficult to use your fingers well and get your hand in a comfortable position. So you're not doing that and then having to twist round. Bring your hand forward so everything can reach on top of the notes. And then 1, 2, and 4 is the other one. 1, 2, and 4. Here's one that people often try which doesn't work very well. Now, I'm not saying you would never use this, but it's not very often. People often try something like 1, 2, and 5. Now, the problem that creates is that the 2 fingers that you're not using, you've got 2 fingers squished up over the space of like over the distance of 1 white key on the piano. And it's just really awkward, and it causes your hand to do that. And causing the same problem, you wouldn't want to do 1, 4, and 5. Unless there's some really specific reason you have to do that. When we're moving around chords, it's really useful to use a different combination of fingers. So instead of sticking to 1, 3, 5 and jumping around like that all the time, that's a little bit cumbersome. So it's really handy to try and switch fingers in the air depending on what's just happened. So let's say, for example, you're going to go from an F major to this E minor. You see what I did there? I used 1, 3, 5 on the F major. And then my thumb is easy to move down, and then I can just use 2 and 4, which are free, for the next chord. So if I went back and forth, my thumb would move up and down, and I can change between 2 and 4, and 3 and 5. And one more position I'll show you. This is 2, 3, and 5. Now, often this one is really awkward for moving positions around, so you don't want to use it a lot, but there's a key example of a situation where you may need to use it, and that is if you need your thumb free to do something else, whatever it may be. So it could be something like this, like pivoting off another note. Basically, that's something I wouldn't tend to use very much unless I needed my thumb free for something else. For the left hand then, well, this is the easy bit. Basically, the fingers are exactly the same. 1, 3, 5 and 1, 2, 4 are going to be really useful for moving around chords at least. And then for this one, for example, if you needed that little finger free, or if you need 4 and 5 free, you can use 1, 2, and 3 for the chord, for something like that. And you could use 5, 3, and 2 if you need your thumb free. I'll just rush through that quickly because basically it's exactly the same as everything I explained for the right hand. Next, I want to look at some inversion shapes of chords, again, that only have white notes in. If you don't know what inversions are yet, this will still make sense if you just look at the shapes, but to learn about them after this video, I've got a playlist which explains everything, teaches you how to find them, understand them, and practice them. There's a link for that in the description below. Let's look at the first inversion shape. So if we just look at the shape first, so we've got a third here, 1, 2, 3, and then we've got a fourth here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this bigger gap here means we're going to have to approach our fingering slightly differently. Now, the one, when you're just practicing these on their own, the most comfortable shape to use, finger-wise, is 1, 2, and 5. And the reason that is, you've got a small gap here and a bigger gap here. So now we can have 2 fingers in between the notes. Basically, if you look at my fingers, 1, 2, and 5, all I'm doing is mimicking the shape on the piano with my fingers. I'm trying to get at the point that you want to try and think about this stuff as simply as possible sometimes. So 1, 2, and 5 is a really comfortable position. But something else that you may need to use is 1, 3, and 5. But a reason you would do that is if you needed this finger free. So let's say you had to play this. So I needed that finger 2 in between here free to play that note in between the chord notes. I think for beginners, they're probably the main ones to practice, but you may also need 2, 3, and 5 as well if you want your thumb free. And for this one, we want to probably hold our hand a bit more further forward so we're not pulling our thumb away from the white keys. Otherwise, you'll have to twist to get it. So bring your whole hand forward so your thumb can meet the white key. And that's in case you want your thumb like this. Or if you're doubling up the C like this. And this one's probably a bit harder as well, but you would use it sometimes. 1, 2, and 4. Let's say you needed your 5th finger free for that note above because you were going to do this. So by now you may have realised that we want to try and find the most efficient, simplest fingering we can for whatever it is we're doing. Second inversion shapes. This is a C major second inversion. Notice how it's back to front from the first inversion shape. We have a bigger gap here of a fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4 notes along. And then the smaller gap is on top now, a third, 1, 2, 3. So here, 1, 3, and 5 is going to be the most ideal shape. Again, my finger shape here kind of more closely matches the shape of the chord. And if we're just practicing them on their own, that's going to be the ideal position. Another comfortable one would be 1, 2, and 4. And one more would be 2, 4, and 5. Now, I don't recommend doing this unless you really have to use your thumb. So I would never use this unless I specifically needed my thumb free for something else. So if I was going to pivot off this note, and again, your hand needs to come forward enough so your thumb can reach the keys without twisting your wrist. So if I'm going to pivot off that thumb, or if I'm going to use a 4-note voicing here, so I'm doubling up that E down here. That one is going to be harder for beginners to get used to though. And you could also use 1, 2, and 3 if, for example, you needed the top 2 fingers free. For the left hand then, these first inversion shapes, 1, 3, and 5 is really good. But also 1, 2, and 4 would be comfortable if you need that free. Maybe 1, 2, and 3 if you need both these fingers or if you need to stretch this one further. And with the second inversions then in the left hand, 1, 2, and 5 is going to be the easiest. You can use 1, 3, and 5 if you need this finger in between free. And you could use 2, 3, and 5 if you needed to use your thumb as well above. Or 1, 2, and 4 if you needed your 5th finger below. Okay, with chords that have black notes in then, I'm not going to go through the whole process again because basically all those finger options are going to be the same. But because the black keys, you know, they're higher up here, they're further that way, it's going to create slightly different feeling shapes on the keyboard. It's more here about our hand positioning. We can still use the same fingering options, but we need to adjust where we place our hand in order to make those feel comfortable. So if I look at an E major chord, this is an E major chord, E, G sharp and B, I can still use 1, 3 and 5. But unlike if I played an E minor where the middle note is white, the middle note is black. So I need to just hold my hand much further forward so I can, get about there on the key so it's nice and comfortable. But the fingers are just the same. I can also use 1, 2 and 4. Again, I might have to hold it further forward so I get, this side of the B flat. I don't want to be twisting my hand to play the note down there. Or I can use 1, 2 and 3. Or 2, 3 and 5 if I need my thumb free. So everything's just the same. It's just about holding your hand in the right position, which is so important to make that feel comfortable. And the same applies to the left hand as well. And the same applies to inversions. Let me just give you one quick example of that. If I was to play a D major in second inversion, that is this. So we've got A, D and F sharp. Now I'm really going to have to hold my hand forward then, because if I try and play that, go on the same plane as if I was playing a D minor with an F in it, I don't want to be twisting like that, and then that's going to make this finger bend. It's really awkward. So keep your hand out forward there, nice curved fingers still. Then you're in a comfortable position where you're making those fingers work, and all the while keeping everything nice and relaxed, like I said, so you can mold your hand into those positions more comfortably. 1, 2 and 4 will also often be a really good fingering choice for a chord that looks like this kind of shape. And in a first inversion position as well, the black note is on the bottom here in this chord example, so our thumb really needs to come much further forward in order to reach it. So we don't want to be twisting our thumb around like that to get it. That's really awkward. It's going to feel terrible. So hand forward, keeping your wrist as straight as it can. I'm going to do a couple of quick examples on some 4-note chords, and I'm going to use some 7th chords. Don't worry if you don't understand what they are yet. Just look at the individual notes at the moment and think about the technique. So if we look at C major 7, this is all white notes. Imagine a regular C major chord. If we put a B on the top, we call that a C major 7 chord. Now we're going to have less options with these shapes. We're going to need to put our thumb on the bottom, and then 9 times out of 10, the thing I find most comfortable is to do 1, 2, 3, and then 5 on the top. Again, make sure your hand is forward enough so your thumb can sit comfortably on that note, because if you bring them back to this part of the keyboard, you're just bringing your thumb away, and then there's no choice but to twist, which is, you don't want to be doing that. So 1, 2, 3 and 5, or 1, 2, 4 and 5. Some people prefer this. I much prefer the other way personally, but I know some people prefer that. If we look at a C7 chord then, this one is a C major triad that has a B flat on top. And again, the black key there is further that way, and we need to play it with our 5th finger, so we really need to bring our hand right forward. In this situation where the top note's a bit closer and the angle from a white note to a black note means we can use finger 4 on top here if we need. These fingers are all going to be kind of similar for those chords in different keys, other types of 7th chords, but it's just going to depend on the shape of it, where the black and white notes are, as to what position you hold your hand in. So you've got to find the right position. A helpful concept to think about is, where can you hover your hand over the top of the chord that's going to allow you to come down together on all the notes at once. So if I was to play this a D flat major 7, that's D flat, F, A flat and C. I don't want to be playing this bit and then trying to squeeze that on. I want to look at the whole thing as one shape and then hold my hand forward so I can literally, just even if you don't play anything, imagine I can reach something comfortably like that when my hand's relaxed. So that simple little thing, just think about shapes, how your hand can fit into that shape comfortably in one go. I'm going to show you one more example of a sus2 chord. Don't worry if you don't know what that chord is yet, but the point is to show you a chord or a type of chord voicing that you may come across where we have two notes that are right next door to each other. So here, I'll show you the chord first. The slight difference is that we have a second here at the bottom, two notes squished right next to each other. So normally we're going to want to use two fingers right next to each other here. If we used 1 and 3 here, then we've just got this random finger that is not much good in between, unless there's a very specific reason you need to do that. So 1, 2 and 5 would be a really good finger choice here. Or if you needed your thumb free down here afterwards, perhaps, you could use 2, 3, and 5. Again, you've still got 2 fingers next to each other on the 2 notes next to each other, and now your thumb is free if you hold your hand a bit further forward. And 1, 2, and 4 would also be good if you needed your 5th finger free. By the way, if you're interested in chords, I do have other videos explaining the theory and everything of building chords on my channel, as well as a really in-depth PDF available on my website, which goes through how to build 18 different common 3 and 4 note chords, includes all the theory and everything to get a really in-depth understanding of that. And as well, it has a giant glossary at the end with nice clear graphics of all those chords in every key.